Good morning, folks in the US and Canada, you on the eastern seaboard, western seaboard. Good afternoon, folks in Europe, and then early evening for you folks out in Asia and other parts of the world. Welcome to a fantastic 90 minutes of debate we're having on the great engineering services world and how can industry 4.0 advancements really sync more effectively with business transformation. So welcome, my name's Phil Fersht, I'm the CEO at HFS Research. I'll be one of your hosts today, and joining will be some of my esteemed analyst colleagues, Saurabh Gupta, who runs our research and advisory, Ritika Fleming, one of our research leaders, and Tanmoy Mondial, who heads up a lot of our engineering services coverage. So they'll be having some fun with me on really driving some great debate. What I'd like to do is get our panelists to all have a little intro amongst themselves, a very quick intro, very quick one, please. Name, rank, and serial number. On what do you do and what do you hope to achieve in today's conversation. So maybe Pierre, would you like to kick us off?
Yes, hello everyone. Very glad to be part of this debate. I am a Chief Digital Officer of the biggest business line in Thales, which is dealing with radio communication products. It's number 2 worldwide. It's about 1.5 billion euros, like 15 countries, and dealing with digital transformation on the whole aspects, customer-facing activities, internet transformation, and all the enablers related to achieving some successful digital transformation.
Thank you. Good to have you on, Pierre. We have Jen Cohen, Toyota Research Institute.
Hi, as you said, I'm Jen Cohen with TRI, and I am the CIO and VP of Core Operations Research and Engineering. It's a long title, but what it really means is that myself and my team work to enable and accelerate our researchers who are doing things like energy and materials science, AI and ML, robotics to help elders age in place, and other technologies and research that will help to amplify humans. And I'm excited and honored to be here today, and really excited to talk about digital transformation and how we maybe can get that a little bit unstuck by changing our perspective. So thank you for having me today.
Awesome, Jen. Great to have you. Kripa Gaunkar, who was head of digital innovation at the Accenture Diabetes Care. Hi, Kripa.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kripa Gaunkar, and I'm the former global head of digital innovation at the Accenture Bayer Diabetes Group. It's a global business of over $1 billion in revenue. Digital technologies is my passion. We haven't been able to use a lot of technologies in the medtech space owing to some of the barriers for adoption. So today I look forward to hearing from the panel on how we can go ahead and advance and, as Jen said, probably get some of the barriers unstuck and create some good digital innovation.
I love that. Barriers unstuck. Thank you. I love that term. Barriers unstuck. That's what One Office is all about, right? One Manufacturing. So moving on to Hilmar Brun. Hi, Hilmar. How are you doing?
Hello, here's Hilmar speaking. So thank you for having me within this panel. I'm really looking forward to this discussion, as digitalization is important but also a misused buzzword to a great extent. And I think it will be interesting to hear several insights how the rubber can really hit the road. And from my position, I'm the head of product lifecycle management at Mettler Toledo.
Thank you. Welcome, Hilmar. Hamid Chauhan of Wipro. Hi, Hamid.
Hello, Phil. Thank you for having me. It's great to be part of this esteemed industry panel. I run engineering and R&D services for Wipro, part of Wipro's executive staff. And digital transformation is core to what we do in engineering, and Industry 4.0 is a significant journey our clients are having. And looking forward to this discussion today. So thank you.
Awesome. And moving on to Rolls-Royce's engineering fellow himself, Steve Gregson.
Right. So I, as you said, I'm the engineering fellow at Rolls-Royce, covering services, which is the dominant part of our business these days. And I lead a number of global transformation activities in the engineering for services space. So I'm an engineer, supporting services. So things like reliability, maintenance optimization, decision support, asset management are all the types of things I get involved with. And because of that, I lead external to Rolls-Royce. I'm the co-chair of the UK Through Life Engineering Services Council. So I work with a spectrum of UK industry and academic organizations to sort of further the cause of this topic. And digital and digitization is a huge part of that enablement space. So I'm really keen to help promote the discussion.
Wonderful. And a colleague of yours in a very different part of the company, I assume, is Chris Murray, also of Rolls-Royce, but in the airline area part of the business.
I'm a leader in the digital organization within the civil large engine business, supporting airlines for Rolls-Royce. I have a responsibility there, really looking at a portfolio of digital services and digital innovations that help airlines improve how they operate. And we aim as Rolls-Royce to use this as a way of better understanding our context as the customer to help inform, how we can evolve our services business and make improvements that way. So really pleased to be a part of the debate today. Looking forward to all the subjects.
Excellent. Good to have you, Chris. Over to Dublin, I believe, to Prasad Sachavalu at Accenture. Hi, Prasad.
Hello, Phil. Thanks for having me here, logging in today from sunny Dublin. Wonderful weather here. So I lead the Industry X engineering and manufacturing practice for North America, based in Princeton, New Jersey. Looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Great to have you, Prasad. Now on to Regu at TCS. Good to have you on here.
Yes. Thank you, Phil, and good morning and good afternoon and good evening to everyone here joining from different parts of the globe. My name is Raghu Ayaswamy. I'm the Senior Vice President and Global Head for Internet of Things and Digital Engineering in Tata Consultancy Services, TCS. I'm very interested in the topic of discussion today, especially the Industry 4.0 transformation, but more than that, how it will sync with the business transformation. I think that's a very interesting discussion, and look forward to the debate.
Awesome, thank you. Khalid Sebti, Capgemini.
Khalid Sebti, based out of San Francisco, part of Capgemini Engineering, and I lead the manufacturing, energy, and consumer product sectors for North America.
Great, good to have you, Khalid. And Narayanan Ramanathan, looks like you're in your IPL gear today, yeah?
Yeah.
Premier League cricket, LNT.
Very good, and I'm glad to hear that you pronounced my name perfectly good. So thanks for that. You can easily call me as NR. And Phil, I head the global head, the digital manufacturing services at L&T Technology Services based out of India. And more importantly, for me, it's really an honor and pleasure to be part of this esteem and alike panel, because I truly believe as a practitioner, and we work on a core engineering and technology, helping our customers. Digital has already dissolved the boundaries. So I'm more excited to hear from today and see that how we can further transform the business, as Raghu mentioned. Look forward to this panel. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Brilliant. Good to have you, Narayan. And finally, and last but not certainly least, is Frank and Tony Sami from Hitachi Vantara. I'd love to hear a bit from you, Frank.
Hey, Phil, thanks for having me. Hello, everybody. Frank Anthony Sami, I'm the Chief Digital Solutions Officer at Hitachi Vantara. Dual mandate. One is what we call scale off digital, where large digital transformation opportunity, how we go to the market. And the second is scale by digital, leveraging the same exact capabilities to drive transformation within our industrial businesses of rail, of utilities and manufacturing. And I think it's high time we had this debate, right? Lots of conversation about Industry 4.0, but how does it drive digital transformation at the business level? What are the impediments? Looking forward to this and learning from it as well. So thank you.
Awesome. Great to have you, Frank. So let's get some context to today's conversation. Firstly, forget this great resignation, great quit, or whatever we call it. I think we're in a great hurry. we've hopefully got a little bit of respite from COVID, even though it still seems to be lingering around in certain parts of Europe. We're obviously facing a talent crisis, which we'll talk about in more depth, but I think this is a long-term issue. This isn't a short-term bubble, and those who can navigate around through and maybe embrace what's happening with people are going to be the most effective. We're seeing a lot of companies trying to move even faster on the investments they made last year, trying to be more effective in their ecosystems. We'll talk a bit more about that shortly. We're seeing a lot of cloud investments and security investments are really heightened with spending in the industry right now in terms of becoming more virtual as a capable organization. This drive around connectivity technologies, obviously connectedness in manufacturing is absolutely critical. We're also seeing heavy investments around process automation, investments in things like conversational AI to drive CX with digital assistants and things like that are really dominating the spend. When we talk to enterprises, love to hear the voices from our debaters today, but two things really dominate the conversation: governing data and driving change. And then driving change obviously is very difficult, and we're just getting used to the environment we're working in today. And how can we drive change faster in that environment? What works, what doesn't work? And then how do we govern the data we need to be effective in our jobs, whether it's external data on macro needs, supply chain needs, or even internal data on our own operations and practices. And then service providers find themselves right at the heart of these transformations, obviously driven by the need for talent, need to get work achieved, to move fast. And we see a very symbiotic relationship developing between SaaS, automation, and outsourcing, which is really driving a lot of relevance to meet client needs today. We'll get into that. So coming off our lovely 2 years of Zoomland, as I like to call it, our sector of manufacturing was really amongst the worst hit by the pandemic. And obviously we're seeing some rebound now. I'd love to hear from the folks on how fast that rebound is happening. But it really was a very, very tough time for the industry, probably one of the toughest ever in places in industries like automotive during the height of the pandemic. And it's a different environment that we're evolving into today. In terms of the movement of speed, we spoke with decision makers across both operations and technology in the Fortune 1000 recently. And I think this sums up a lot of what's happening in this great hurry we're seeing today, is that 53% think they know what they've got to do now. They're just rushing ahead to deliver on their plans. Those plans could be way off in the future, could be very complicated, but I think more companies than not are figuring out what they've got to do. About a third are still figuring this thing out. They're still kind of heads down, trying to work out a way forward. And then a smaller number think we can go back to 2019 and before, where we can just snap back as quickly as possible. But there's clearly a big desire to move fast, to move aggressively into the world of the future. We'll talk a little bit about our one ecosystem model, and we've aligned it here with the manufacturing organizations that we talk to a lot of. And a lot of what we've started doing is really what we call Horizon 1 of digital engineering, where a lot of that is just fixing a lot of the tech debt, a lot of the integration issues that have really plagued our organizations over so many years, and finally being addressed because we can't be functional in the cloud, etc. A lot of what we're moving to now is what we call One Office, which is very experiential. This is much more about how do we solve process issues, how do we make changes to organizations that we may have never made before. Many businesses, they only really ever done the same things the same way, just a little faster, a little more effectively, a little cheaper, until we've had to operate in a sort of remote environments of how do we now operate as a virtual business. It's the first time many enterprises and manufacturing organizations have had to make real changes to the underlying process, the way that they do things. And so we see a lot of emerging solutions like generative design. Obviously, AI is here today. You can't even operate effectively if you're not well linked into the right supply chains, the right online retailers, Amazon, Alibaba, these types of places. You've got to be integrated in there to be effective. And that takes us into where we think we're going, which is a one ecosystem horizon, which is much more about moving beyond these walls of the enterprise into the whole ecosystem that surrounds us. And so we look at monetization of data, external collaboration, finding commonalities with companies within our industry, within our industry value chain, but also in adjacent industries as well. So how do we work, for example, in healthcare? You're working across healthcare, pharma, retail, and regulatory issues now across industries. And we have to remember we're only one piece of that life cycle. How do we become a broader piece of that life cycle and really benefit from working more cooperatively with partners, with hyperscalers, with service providers, with like companies, even with competitive cooperative companies in the ecosystems that we operate. And sometimes it's easy to look at this in a very linear fashion, but this really isn't. This is a concurrent series of horizons that are coming together around our organization. And we look at the employee experience within the organization. How can that be really closely aligned with much more straight through processing to customers and their partners? So how can we start to wrap our outcomes on our shared goals around the customer impact, the customer experience? How do we start to leverage our employee capabilities in a way that people are thinking about their customers in a much more holistic, unified fashion? I talked with a couple of leaders of organizations in the services world recently, and they both said they're having a harder time selling their value to their own employees than they are their customers these days. So that pretty much tells you the state of our industry. But then we look at these technological factors that are really emerging. Some are right here today, some are a bit further out, but having AI-enabled decisions is something that we're doing all the time and refining constantly. We're constantly getting better at that, creating self-improvement, improving feedback loops, and leveraging computer vision and other design areas to be effective. This consciousness with metaverse is apparently where we're going as well in the next few years. Web3 is becoming really relevant as a conversation topic, and the impact of decentralized platforms, decentralized data, the impact of blockchain obviously on that, and DeFi, and then obviously edge computing, things like that make it very, very important. But beyond the technological factors, the key piece to this whole jigsaw has got to be the people and culture factors that are really moving the needle here. The ability to reward skills and culture that drive collaboration, having much more purpose-led value creation across stakeholders, having really strong shared goals and incentives across the board. So it's this confluence, this confluence of tech and people factors that are driving us to be far more effective across these three stakeholders of employees, our customers, and our partners. So let's get started in the debate. I hope that sets some context. I'm going to hand you off to Saurabh, who's going to kick off with the first big question for everybody.
Hey, thanks, Phil, for setting the context. And as Phil was talking about the concept of this one ecosystem and the one office, if we look at our industry, right, we've always looked at these services in somewhat of silos. There's engineering services has always operated in a markets of its own. Then there have been IT services. You look at consulting services, you look at business services or BPO. But I think as we've been talking about, there has been always this conversation around IT OT convergence. But shouldn't the convergence that we should be talking about is IT OT and business convergence, right? Because without that business transformation angle to IT OT, I'm not sure if we are actually getting to the goals and the aspirations that we really want to get to. So the first question that I really want to pose is, will these services become closely linked, with engineering services, technology services, and business services, as we see Industry 4.0 move just beyond the shop floor into the entire supply chain of end-to-end supply chain? And I know, Steve, maybe you can help kick this off. You've been talking about the definition of what engineering services is. What is your perspective on this?
So I think there's a bit of a terminology thing to be clear about, I think. So I work in a group within Rolls-Royce, which is probably a Rolls-Royce terminology uniquely called Engineering for Services. So that is a group, a capability organ, a group within the business that is looking at applying engineering tools, techniques, methods, knowledge to the challenge of supporting complex products across their life cycle. Okay. Now, in order to do that, we liaise with many engineering service providers who provide some of that capacity that we use. But the thing I want to highlight, regardless of the terminology, I think, is looking after a complex product for 20, 30, 40 years through its life, and then making money based on offering services around that is a very challenging thing to do, and one which requires complete alignment really across all of those other facets you mentioned. So it's one of the most integrated things that you're challenged to do, is to make synchronized, uniform, proactive, reactive, tactical, strategic decisions about that portfolio of assets that you're trying to manage through life. And it requires a deep engagement with manufacturing, with design, with logistics, with supply chains, with your suppliers, their suppliers, your customer, etc. And so to me, it's just absolutely vital. If you're going to enter the services market, which is where I think the direction of travel is, where people are going to be more and more seeking, they want to pay for an outcome. They don't want to pay for what they maybe bought in the past, which was a product which then required them to look after it. They're looking now more and more for just an outcome. And if you're an airline, you just want power and you want it to be there when you need it. The obligation then of looking after that complexity falls to the likes of ourselves, and that's what our service model is based upon. And like I say, that is underpinned by an integrated approach across all those disciplines that you just mentioned. So I'm not sure whether that helped with the clarification. But
That gets us started. I wanted to bring Jen into this conversation. Jen, you and I talked very briefly before this, and you were talking about your challenges as a CIO without getting the business involved. So do you want to opine a little bit on this integrated approach that Steve is talking about?
A little bit. I will say I'm on the research side, not on the supply chain or manufacturing side. So I just want to be clear about that. But I do think, a big part of my role is to help ensure outcomes. I love the way that Steve put that. I think that's primarily why I get a paycheck, right? And so I think the key is the relationships we have with the business and the technology serving the business. And having spent a lot of my life as a technologist, I love technology, I love shiny, I love new, but those things don't necessarily serve the business. And so that connection, that link, those relationships, and I really want to echo Steve, like having folks on the same page, working towards the same goal is so important. And I don't know, in terms of engineering services, if that, what that exactly will look like in Industry 4.0, but I know it won't be successful unless it's in service of the business. And I know it won't be successful unless we are aligned in how we approach it. So I think, when I think about the job that I do, like hopefully what we're doing is seeing the different parts of the business and helping to bring them together. And that's not traditionally something you think of as technology. It might be more people and culture or change management, but it's such a key part, and you won't have those outcomes unless we are aligned. So I hope that helps.
If I could just expand on that further, because it was aligned exactly with what I was intending to say. The understanding then the decisions, the value-based decisions that underpin the delivery of that outcome is absolutely essential first, before you even think about the technology. And then the person making those decisions probably doesn't even know what to ask for when it comes to the technology. So this is where the partnership comes in, by having the technologist and the IT providers and digital providers deeply understand what the purpose is that the business user is trying to achieve, and then what decision that person is trying to make in order to realize what value. That's when innovation really takes place, because neither party knows what they don't know. And it's only by working together and understanding the business transformation you're trying to perform, would you then bring the technology into focus. And it might be something you didn't even think of that makes the real difference.
Yeah.
And I come across that all the time. So I think that there's a real culture in the world of digital where you ask for the requirement and you expect the person you're asking to know what they want. And I genuinely believe they don't. They just know what they're trying to do, and they don't know what you can do for them. So I think breaking that barrier down and trying to even having a Babel fish, if people can remember what a Babel fish is, it's having that thing that translates, from one world to another is really important and quite elusive, I think.
Yeah. So I see, Prasad, you were smiling a little bit, and I know we've heard from two enterprises on the need for integrated approach. Would love to get a perspective from a service provider at being at Accenture. I think you even unveiled the one Accenture, right, a year and a half back. My sense is primarily to provide this sort of integrated approach to solving complicated problems. What is your point of view on this need for convergence across IT, OT, BT?
First of all, I don't consider this as a matter of debate. It's a necessity, is how I would put it. One Accenture approach is fundamentally geared towards you have physical assets in the context of manufacturing and engineering that we are speaking about. You have physical assets, and as Steve was describing, the whole transformation around business models is about how do you manage those asset life cycles in the future? And the servitization model is geared towards generating new revenues from those assets. So the challenge is, how do you align the enterprises and enterprise technologies to deliver to this new business model? And that requires definitely a convergent thinking. So working with C-suites, our attempt is always to infuse that integrated approach to a new business model. Therefore, you need to decide on capabilities that you need in the organization, what kind of operating model you need, what's your monetization strategy that is going to drive. So that's at one end. But if you look at the Venn diagram of this transformation, you're looking at physical assets, you're looking at enterprise systems and technology, and then you're looking at people. So the capability models need to serve all these three masters. That means when you are looking at asset transformation, it could be an asset deployed in manufacturing, or it could be deployed in a real customer's environment. You're looking at convergence of engineering, supply chain, manufacturing, all of it coming together to conceptualize, transform, and really deliver that product out of the gate. So that's one part. But when you look at how do you close loop these with billing systems, CRM systems, and how do you create the environment where you are able to do automated processing with the asset connectivity and with the data and the consumption that is happening, it requires a holistic transformation of how business processes are engineered. Therefore, no conversation on a forward-thinking business model based on Industry 4.0 and servitization model is complete without talking about enterprise transformation. So that's why we came up with the One Accenture approach, that you need to look at this in a very comprehensive way, look at capabilities, organizational model, and operating model, and how do you really execute on that strategy while enabling all these three dimensions. That's our vision of taking this forward and converging.
Yeah, no, thanks, Prasad. So I wanted to see if Hilmar, you manage the entire product life cycle management, and do you see that happening in real life, this sort of convergence where it's sort of product life cycle management is becoming seamless across information technology, operational technology, and business? What has been your experience?
Yeah, It's a very good question. When I look at my own team or the PLM solution, or part of my team, the PLM solutions team, or it started off many years before I joined the company really as a CID support center. And that means really as an internal engineering organization, which helped the designers to improve their work. Then it moved more and more towards really supporting the data management around it, so building a PLM system on top of it. And now we are actually at the crossroad realizing that the CID-centric PLM application is not end of life, but it's only part of the story. So now we also not realize, but we are exposed to it that, hey, integration to the MES system becomes really important, making sure that you handle the bill of materials. But now you need also the integration to the application lifecycle management world, so the unknown software world. And actually, I see here a tendency that the tail wags the dog at the end, meaning that though in our world still our processes, our business is centered around products, that really this digitally enhanced solutions we are providing and we will provide more and more really change completely the tools, the systems, the processes we have, and that actually the software is leading and also forcing everybody who is on traditional IT side finally to understand the business. I would say 3-5 years ago, the people, or even 1 year ago, which were responsible for this SAP side, they didn't care whether we sell a mechatronic product, whether we sell a service, or whether we sell microphones or cups or whatever, because the content of the product was not relevant. Nowadays, with digitally enhanced offerings, with data as a service, knowledge as a service, things we are thinking about, it becomes essential that you understand what it is about. And that's not only for IT, it's also for the legal departments, for everybody in the organization, that the time where you could be a general purpose lawyer internally is coming probably to an end. You really need now to be in the business, and that is for me the most important transformation I'm actually seeing, that without a full understanding of the business, you won't be able to be a service provider in the future, whether you are internally or externally. That doesn't really matter.
Yeah, no, thanks, Hilmar. That was really, really good. I just, before I move on to the next question, I wanted to get Chris, you into this conversation. You lead airline insights and analytics, and I'm assuming, just like Hilmar shared his view on product lifecycle management, what are you seeing from delivering relevant and actionable insights? How are you requiring, if at all, to integrate across these systems and processes and people?
Yeah, I see a very similar picture here to what's being talked through so far, and completely agree. The integration and alignment is essential. If there's anything that I would add is, in this picture we've got the 4 circles. I think a consultative approach is really key to enable the partnership and the glue we need to bring the rest of this together. Yes, I work in airlines, and it's a very organization and process-centric business operation. And so when you look at how you help with the airline's ability to improve, you tend to start with those organizations and with those key processes. But it becomes something that's not as adaptive as it needs to be for the airline to continue to understand how to maintain the gains or to take it to the next level. And I think the thing that we're focusing on at the moment, which is quite new, and it's causing a need for us to change culture within airline operations, It's about enabling the people, the individuals within the operation to understand how their own competency relates to their ability to keep adapting in a way to sustain all the benefits that we're trying to achieve. So, taking the technology of digital and using it to help raise awareness and a self-reflection of how one's decisions is supporting both your own development as well as achieving the business outcome is kind of a new sweet spot that we're aiming for these days.
No, that's great. So let me move to the next question and the next theme, which is, supply chains have been in the news for right and wrong reason, and supply chains are no longer a supply chain conversation. They're a boardroom conversation. They're government conversations, and COVID-19 and now what's happening in Ukraine is shining a light on our supply chains, and a number of issues have been similar, but they're much more exaggerated these days. In fact, I'm not even sure whether supply chain is the right term, right? It just connotates a constrained linear thinking of and I think where we're moving towards is supply networks, right? So and manufacturing sector has always been at the forefront of supply chain innovation. So I wanted to get in, perhaps Harmeet, if you can kick us off, what are you seeing in terms of biggest pressure points, and how do we unshackle these supply chains and move towards the supply network that practically every organization aspires to get to?
Thank you, Saurabh, for a great question there. In fact, in the last 30 days, many client meetings we are having, this is no more a CIO conversation. This is no more a CTO conversation. This is becoming quickly a CEO and a board conversation. And the biggest question, I've been in few C-level conversations, the question is, and I think the esteemed panel, even the earlier question touched upon these things, is the aspect of data visibility on a real-time basis, right? So to me, the whole digital transformation is about people, process, technology, domain, but the disruption is so massive, the transformation is so massive that they're saying, I need to know a real-time view. I can't be looking for a view which is 30 days out or 15 days out or even a day out. The expectation of agility in your supplier base, agility in terms of data being made available for the C-level to take corrective actions immediately, for them to have plan Bs and the disaster recovery mechanisms are being discussed in this context as well, not just to keep the IT systems going, but how do you have supply chain? Because it's becoming a core transformation of the companies. If you take automotive industry as an example, it is going through a mega transformation by itself, and the supply chain disruptions are not helping, right? If you look at the whole Ukraine situation, nickel is causing challenges. The pricing models have to change. Now, for a CEO to be able to do that, he or she needs to be able to move real time. So if you see the example of a Rivian fiasco or a Tesla changes recently, it is their ability of using AI in their supply chains, the ability to use knowledge graphs and other technology sets beyond your core PLM, MES, ERP data points to really help bring that visibility. The semiconductor industry is experiencing that. If you take the vaccine distribution journey, which we all went through and still going through in many parts of the world, needed that agility for you to react and deal with. So as a service provider, as Wipro, this is where we're bringing the next generation of consulting capabilities to really refine the use case. What is available for a certain automotive, not applicable to aerospace, not applicable to medtech, not applicable to a consumer good. It's becoming highly, highly customized. But the technology building blocks are similar, but you need to be able to contextualize, you need to be able to customize. And what we're seeing is hyperscalers are playing a significant role in this journey as well.
Yep.
So just hopefully that gave a good perspective.
Yeah, no, Harmeet, thanks. I think the need for data and transparency is something that you rightfully articulated. I wanted to go to Raghu, at TCS. You guys keep talking about business 4.0, not just industry 4.0. Talk us a little bit about your perspective and what you're hearing in your conversations around supply chains and unshackling the supply chain challenges that we are having.
No, I think sort of there's a lot of discussions we have seen across in the supply chain challenges. The view one has to take is number one would be how do we design the supply chain? Because when you drive the supply chain to a most efficient kind of setup, there is also an inbuilt risk that you need to carry. I would probably put some examples. So when we had the tsunami in Japan, in Sendai region, there are a number of suppliers, some key suppliers of electronic components for automotive was impacted. So many automotive OEMs have to go out of supply of critical components on the ECUs. So they couldn't run the factory lines as planned, even though their factories are much away from the location of the disaster. Because most of these OEMs have operated on the principle of just in time and vendor managed inventory. So they didn't enough carry the amount of inventory that is required for them to continue the operation until the impacted supplier can come back on track. So the design criteria that you think is efficient in one principle on a completely different kind of setting on the context is not as effective, and it can lead to production delays, as we can see. This is exactly what we are seeing in the COVID pandemic situation, is when our supply chains are so tightly coupled across the global networks, when this network is broken at some point of time, always you have a severe level of disruptions, or at least moderate level of disruptions. So what is that we must think, and what we hear from customers is today, 2 or 3 things are very significantly emerging. Number one is how we can use technologies to improve the visibility of the network. You said that in the supply network, which is true. So how can first I know where I have demand and where I have capacity, and is there a way I can find a way to kind of interlink that and move that? That's, I think, and technology can, with IoT and Industry 4.0, sensors, data, analytics, can do a lot about it. And second is, how do I really make this supply chain de-risk and make it flexible? And obviously that carries a cost. So an inventory carries a cost. So a supply chain at a different location in the geography carries a cost. So there is a risk and cost associated. But I think people are thinking of what could be the flexible models that I can really adapt in terms of, and there is also a principle of how I can, in the sense of product, how I can simplify and make it far more modular and far more reusable, so that I am kind of less burdened with a million parts of inventory that I need to carry and manage. So all those 3 things we see customers are really driving: technology, driving flexibility, and driving modularity in the engineering.
All right. So flexibility, modularity, and technology. Raghu, Khalid, you at Capgemini talk a lot about, I think you call it frictionless, right? Frictionless supply chains. Talk to us a little bit on what you're seeing on the ground, and can these supply chains become frictionless?
Yeah, so I think with COVID, what we're seeing is that customers are using the opportunity to sort of rethink their supply chain, quite frankly, and the concept of indigenous supply chain is coming back. And there is going back to basics of looking at companies' bombs and deciding what to manufacture, what to buy, and where to buy from, because they're realizing that putting all your manufacturing in one location in the world can be a problem. Sourcing a raw material from one country in Africa is risky, and so they're going back to doing the basic of value analysis, value engineering, and deciding on what to build. And when you do that, of course, when you decide to make, the question becomes, how can I make it as cheap as doing it offshore? And that's a big challenge. And so we're seeing these questions asked by customers. We're working with car manufacturers around, for example, because of the semiconductor shortage on alternatives design, right? So it's sort of, I can't fulfill this equipment. How can I replace it? What options do I have? What does it do to my pricing? What does it do to my distribution? How do I incorporate that in my product design and manufacturing? So lots of these changes. I like to say no prices could go to waste, and this is what's happening. Customers are using this opportunity to ask the tough questions, and we're right in the middle of it.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. I see, Steve, you.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight an adjacency to this conversation, which we'll probably touch on later, but the whole topic of sustainability and where you source your material from and how much you have to transport it around the world, for example. It's all very similar thought processes required, and probably ought to be taken together with the other, the supply chain robustness conversation. Because I think historically, businesses have grown up by sourcing to the lowest cost, but that isn't the most sustainable or the most resilient either. So it's how do you optimize those choices simultaneously? I think that it struck me that was a relevant thing to point out.
No, absolutely. I think sustainability has to be a discipline, not just a line item, right? Mm-hmm. And that is the biggest change that we are starting to see. So I wanted to move on to the next question, but Prasad, do you want to quickly, I think I saw your hand raised. Do you want to quickly make a point?
Yeah, just a quick comment that what we have to expect in view of all the geopolitical changes and the impact that we have seen is organizations looking at the whole network of supply chains in a very different way. So call it a stress test result from the supply chains, but I am expecting a lot of manufacturing organizations to rethink how the supply chain networks are going to be designed for future. And what Steve mentioned, sustainability is going to be a factor in that, but expect an area where you can source ideas globally, but you want to go local in favor of reduction of carbon emissions, your sustainable, improve your footprint from a sustainability standpoint, also from a securities risk and containing those risks. So those are all factors that lend the environment for implementation of Industry 4.0 in the supply chain as a whole to bring a holistic transformation in the enterprises. And that's where the business transformation next frontier is going to be. Just a thought, I thought I'll add it to what Steve mentioned.
No, thanks, Prasad. Chris, last word to you on supply chains.
Yeah, so I'll be quick. So as Rolls-Royce, we see ourselves as a supplier, as a part of a network into the airline market. And a market, like you say, that doesn't have a lot of transparency, that in itself doesn't really have a very clear visibility of the network and how it's operating. And that's a two-way problem, especially in the space of digital, where you've got new innovators trying to come into this market all the time with bright, interesting ideas. So one thing we're doing to try and help better connect, raise more effective awareness overall is create an initiative we call UCOVA, which is about creating an industry collaboration forum combined with industry marketplace, where we're able to provide services upon industry standards that make it easier for everyone to access each other, access industry knowledge in best practice, as well as be able to collaborate on data that they can share. So by doing so, just remove a lot of the friction that we would have in a very heavily regulated industry with very deep, complex, solutions that we're trying to provide to, free up the ability to see what's happening and enable that collaboration and partnership to flow more easily.
Yeah, that's a great example actually of the one ecosystem that Phil was talking about in action, right? So thanks for sharing that, Chris. So let me move on and hand it over to my colleague Tanmoy. And we've been wondering, why is digital transformation? We've been talking about this for more than a decade now. Why is it still so hard to get to? Tanmoy, do you want to kick us off here?
Sure, Saurabh, thanks. So we have already touched upon the topics like digital transformation, data, IT/OT convergence. So transformation is not an option right now. It's almost a mandate across organization. So in manufacturing, we have already seen 3 previous revolutions which cater to mechanization, electrification, deployment of IT system, industrial automation. But what Industry 4.0 does provide us a lot of real-time data. So it is often shared that data is the new oil, and it is one of the key pillars for digital transformation as it enables more informed decision-making and provides actionable insights. But even having this huge influx of data, enterprises are struggling to achieve their strategic objectives. Through our survey to the enterprise customers, we have observed that some of the key pointers that comes out from this, that they are facing issues of data management. So that is data governance, data security, data quality, all these things. Then we have organization issues like culture, leadership buy-in, resource readiness, heterogeneous IT landscape, lack of business goal and technology alignments, and so on. So digital transformation looks very attractive on paper, but it is very, enterprises are facing extreme difficulties to achieve it in the real life. So let's, if we can go to our esteemed panelists to have their view. So starting with Kripa, so being in the medtech sector, which is kind of more regulated than the traditional ones, can you please shed some light that how digital transformation is progressing in the medtech sectors?
Yeah, that's, as you mentioned, we are more regulated and I think more regressive in our adoption to digital technologies. Can digital technology create huge value in healthcare systems globally? Yes, but there's several barriers. We normally go to customers who are patients, physicians, healthcare providers, who are barriers to adoption of new technologies in themselves. But on the other hand, we also have payers and regulators who have conflicting strategies on how to carry forward the healthcare transformation in itself. So while we have the payers who say, drive more value through your products, but decrease the costs globally, we have regulators on the other end who say, increase your value and your accuracy. I do think digital technologies are very much needed, especially now with the medtech industry looking for speed and transformation post-pandemic stage. So we do need telemedicine. We do need remote patient monitoring. We will need predictive models. Otherwise, our healthcare system will not be able to handle any of the pandemic that will come in. I think there is a unique opportunity to work with the more traditional mindset, if I can say, of pharma companies and executives within the pharma companies and medtech devices to be able to roll out more digital products that have a global outreach. The downside of this, and my service providers here would agree to it, you cannot sell technology to most of the C-suite in medtech companies and pharma companies, especially when they think you're creating technical debt and probably products globally, which will have to face a very difficult life cycle management if you cannot solve a business problem or a problem within the industry. So I think for us technologists, the challenge is keep your technology in the back end. Try to solve a real world healthcare problem. It needs to be seamless to your patient. It needs to be seamless to your physician and your healthcare providers. You don't have to scare off your payers with, someone mentioned on the panel earlier, we have way too many buzzwords on our digital transformation journey. I think that's the biggest challenge that medtech industry faces compared to some of the other industries where we have the panelists today. We need to keep the product simple and something that caters to a global audience as much as possible, but also something that meets stakeholders, external stakeholders who are very traditional in their outlook to changes in technology. From an internal stakeholder value creation, I think we deal with executives and stakeholders who are used to creating more physical products or molecules that turn out to be blockbusters. That's what we survive on. To tell them that you're going to create products that will get you data, which one day will lead to data monetization, that's a challenge me and a lot of my counterparts in the industry face. I think we have a great window of opportunity with the pandemic coming into the picture where everyone knows this is not a choice, right? Digital transformation is a reality, and it's probably coming to medtech space a bit more faster than what some of the leadership would be comfortable for.
Sure, thanks, Kripa. So one of the great point you mentioned, it's not more about technology, but it's more of business goal and technology alignment, organization, culture change. Yeah, that's good. So in the same line, if I can go to Frank, since you are catering to a lot of different industry customers, so what is your view that what is holding back the enterprises to achieve their digital transformation objectives?
Sure. So the way I look at it, Tanmoy, is if you look at it as the vision and strategy that large enterprises have, right, manufacturing enterprises have, on adopting this, driving into more servitization, having a direct connect with the customers, not just being B2B, but also B2C, right? There is clarity, there is realization that we need to move. Where it starts breaking down for some companies is at two or three different levels, right? So the first is your classic innovators dilemma. You have your existing products that are today driving a bulk of your P&L. And you know that this is at some point going to decline. And there's new products and services that are needed. That's going to drive your outer year profitability and revenues, right? But the ability to take those decisions to say, how do I be systematic in identifying the investment decisions and driving the balance between my current year P&L versus what's going to drive the P&L for a few years out, right? So the classic innovator's dilemma about how do we manage that. The second is the complexity in technology, right? I mean, the technologies have not made it easy. And as you progressively look at it to say, in the world of the CIO, it's fairly standardized, right? So the ERP systems and the enterprise applications, the data management systems, all of those have driven a fair amount of standardization. And when you take that into more of a concrete floor environment, if you will, right? Your warehouses, your manufacturing environments, your standardization reduces, right? Your interoperability between your systems reduces. And lots of firms have also acquired different capabilities, technologies, and suddenly you're dealing with a very heterogeneous set of automation technologies from which you're trying to drive some kind of standardized data, right? So that becomes challenge. And it becomes worse when you go out into the field outside of even your manufacturing and warehousing environment, right? In transportation and all of that, right? Then it just completely breaks down. So the technology complexity is the second part. Third part is just the organizational challenges, right? You have even if you include something like a sales force, right? Your sales team commissioned on selling big iron, big equipment, they sell huge CapEx deals and make a commission out of it. Suddenly, when you try to start selling those as a service, the real challenge then becomes how do you then even do your sales plans, right? How do you make sure that your sales teams that are used to selling products, selling physical products, now are incentivized to do as a service, which might be a lower, deal size. How do you compensate for it? But also equally important is how do you even train a sales force that is used to selling core physical products to say, now you're going to buy a service from me, right? Your channel. So I think the complexity of these three different levels, right? If we can solve for that, then you've got the vision of servitization and direct connection with the consumer, translating all the way into execution and making it real.
Right. Thanks for Frank. So I think we have got back Pierre. So Pierre, since we are talking about digital transformation and a lot of challenge that we have observed from an organization adoption point of view. So since being a CDO, what is your view that how these digital technologies can be a real enabler for increasing digital fluency or organization adoption or culture point of view, both from people and process success for an organization?
Yes, I had been cut. I'm not exactly sure I understood because of the sound of the tone your question, your very last question. Could you repeat, please, because it was a little bit difficult for me to hear.
Yeah, sure, Pierre. So in digital transformation, we are observing a lot of organizational issues and challenges. So being a CDO, how you facilitate the adoption of digital technologies across the organization, both from people and process point of view, so that the enterprises can achieve their strategic objectives. So can you please shed some light on this?
Yes, from a people point of view, it's certainly one absolutely critical issue to deal with at a lot of levels, from the buy-in of the top of the C-suite, which is absolutely essential, and the sponsorship is crucial. And we can make a link to the innovator dilemma as a transformer. How efficient are you in putting up the business cases to get the buy-in of the sponsorship? This is turned out to be really something very important, but it's across the whole chain, starting from awareness for everyone in terms of digital to transformation dedicated to, for example, artificial intelligence that we try to develop here and there based on the skills. It's also still on the people side, absolutely essential that we have integrated teams working together with pure digital skills, but also the business side, because to my experience, it's really the business who is driving and finding where are the pain points or the value. And we really need to make this very strong connection between the digital skills and the business skills, and even better when that's possible, for example, with low code, no code solutions, enable people in the businesses to play around with digital and start new things, innovate. And of course, when a good idea emerges, then of course we can make sure that it becomes industrialized, which is not trivial by itself, by the way. And in terms of processes and organization, there's also a lot to be done. Data governance, we are on the way on that, but it's again coming back to a lot of new roles like data steward, data owners, and you have to make sure that data owners are really empowered to drive change in the organization. And yes, data council to make some decisions. Well, I could speak probably a lot more about that. Maybe looking at your slide, a few comments. Data security issues is certainly something absolutely crucial in our businesses because it's either military or it's related to airlines or aerospace, and a lot of things have to be certified. So it adds one layer of complexity and exposure to security. So the risk is also very important, designing critical systems. So when you try to embed AI or data-driven decisions, then you have to really take this critical LITI into account and make sure that you have perhaps some monitoring and surveillance mechanisms on top of the models or the new solutions that show us that you have a reversionary plan, or at least something to do when it goes wrong. And to be honest with you, designing critical systems with AI inside is still partly, at least, an open challenge. And we have, for example, very nice initiative with several industries working together in France and in Europe to tackle this. I've been surprised in the ranking of the slide that the lack of digital fluent talent is the smallest one, because for me it's something very, very important again.
Yeah, absolutely, Pierre. So we are also observing the same, that most of the cases enterprises are focusing on the hard factors like technology, etc. But some of the soft factor issues like culture, adoption point of view, data governance point of view, and others, there is so much focus. So if we can shift to our next question. So we have seen that Industry 4.0 is a conglomeration of a lot of emerging technologies. So from an enterprise, in our survey with the enterprise customers, we have seen that in near term, they are focusing on cybersecurity and AI as their most investment emerging technology opportunities in the near term. So in an Industry 4.0, cybersecurity is not only IT security, there are a lot of OT securities are also involved. In a smart factory, there are thousands of open nodes, which are potential points of hacking. So from an enterprise or manufacturer point of view, they have to ensure security of all these nodes. Even AI has also evolved a lot. From a data crunching point of view, we have seen video analytics, which is used in the quality monitoring, and some of the other security issues that getting used very progressively. So if we can go to our panelists, to Michael, BAT is moving to smart factory and some of the new combustible tobacco products. So how all these technology innovations are improving the manufacturing performance to increase the manufacturing productivity and efficiency? So can you please let us know your views?
We started rather late. So we are very 2 to 3 years into this transformation. So we're still in the very early learning stage, great potential, but also we realize the one and the most important thing is those old technologies looks great, very sexy, and they are future. We 100% agree. But it's equally important is we're not doing technology for the sake of technology. You will need to use technology to solve a problem of business, eliminate losses. That's always the starting point. So that's number one principle. We're always trying to focusing and fundamentally focusing on. I think second point is probably the previous sort of a panel guests probably mentioned that already. If I'm repeating same with everyone else, right? I apologize. But one of our critical learning is you will need a very good, solid data architecture and a cybersecurity system before you launching any advanced machine learning or data analysis program. It's almost like whatever the vehicle you want to drive, Mercedes-Benz, EV, Tesla, highway, charging station, and a petrol station need to be there first. The infrastructure is so essential. We made a mistake, in fact. So we started with technology first. So in fact, we based on the priorities we have, choose machine vision system, digital twin, and as well as the predictive maintenance technologies in some of the pilot factories. Their successes, which we're in the process industrialize it and rolling out based on POV, their failures, which is great, right? Part of learning. But the greatest thing we learned from those fail are two reasons hanging us back. It's not because the technology itself is not mature. It's all because of either the data foundation infrastructure is not ready. For example, we did a great digital twin project in Korea, which aimed to get our waste, which is, imagine tobacco, right? The waste is one of the most valuable kind of value we want to recover. We aim to reduce the amount of waste we produce, which it did deliver the result. Fantastic success. But we realized the amount of data we need to get from the process is huge, feeding into machine learning. Yeah. And without a proper infrastructure, including SCADA, data historians, IoT sensors, right, is simply not sustainable. Yeah, so that emphasized a lot, say, before we dive into the new technologies, right? Number one is to really understand what is the business loss, business problem you want to solve. Don't go hard with all the new technologies. If it's sexy, if it's fancy, going to solve a business problem, number one. Second is, whenever you choose the technology use cases, right, look into what's required for data, what's required for your data architecture in the factory, including cyber risk, and how to make sure this is in place before you want to install technologies. Believe me, this is a more strategic decision, because if you talk to any business lead, say, I'm not giving you any value today, but I'm asking you to upgrade your digital platform. I need you to have the OPC gateway available. I need you to have the IoT sensors available. Then you'll be able to see return in 2 to 3 years from now. It does require sponsorship from seniors. It does need accompanying strategic decision and determination to invest in the future. Yeah, so this is one learnings we got. The second learning we got are the people, are the process. So there's one pilot we in fact try to do the machine learning to diagnose machine failure in Brazil, in our another lighthouse factory. The technology was great. In the pilot POV, it proved 43% reduce of the failure, and it's really simple, it's really working. But when we going down to roll out, right, we meet sort of the hurdles and also the roadblocks. The simple reason because the mass organization is not ready for it. They have old way of working. They still don't quite get into use data to solve problem. They all still more based on experience. So what the success of POV is because we have several people who is more open-minded, more future forward-looking. They will be able to adopt it and use it effectively to prove the value. When you come to the mass rollout, right, we realized organization readiness is in fact very crucial. So BAT in our digital transformation, our focus are 3: people, data, and technology, in that exact order. So in a way, that's require a lot of group central coordination, and also a lot of senior holders down sponsorship, and also as well as a strategic investment for the future. It's been tough because this year including, is not easy for everyone. So we realize this marathon is not a 1 or 2 years project. It's going to be a transformation lasting for decades.
Thanks, Michael. So we have also observed the same type of reasons in our previous question as a barrier for transformation. Thanks. So if we can go to Narayanan from LTTS, since you are catering to a lot of different industry customers like auto, aero, industrial products, medical device, telecom, etc. And Michael mentioned some of the key pointers like people, data, and technology are the key enablers for having a successful pilot and so on. So what is your view based on your customer interaction in this space?
Tanmay, before pandemic or even before the crisis, innovation was kind of a department where they said that think tank and they do that. Now what we see in reality in the market space is innovation has become an ingredient in every department across the line of business. Okay? That is no more a separate department, which typically innovation does in engineering, R&D, and so on. At LTTS, how do we look at this? I'll just give a perspective. Okay, you're given the topic as digital engineering and so on. I would like to rephrase it like, say, we engineer the digital. Okay. We don't look at it from an idea, product perspective or technology perspective, for a very simple reason. Number one, I'll try to do. Now the pandemic has accelerated. Today, what the customers really struggle, which Steve also touched upon to one extent, Chris also highlighted that, and Pierre mentioned it. Today, where the innovation comes in is, I have technology in place. I have all the tools and platforms in place. The challenge where our customers, especially the engineering and manufacturing customers face is, how do I tie my value to my transformation benefits and pick up the right technology and platform for me to do that? Okay, as you know, that executive also mentioned, Michael also mentioned about people, technology. He gave the order of that execution, right? So data and technology, if I put it that way. So the idea here is the first innovation comes in, am I choosing the right validated use case, which is a business problem, either tied to a top line or a bottom line or processes, then define the goal. Wherever the customer has got a clarity of that, they have got the innovation right and digital transformation right. Wherever they failed or fed the challenges because they started, because there is a mandate from the boardroom, there is a mandate from the competition, they started executing, started putting it across, have a midterm or a small success, then they don't know how to carry forward and scale it. So what we do, I've been putting to Phil as well, what you're calling as industry 4.0, in LTTS, we call that industry 4.0 now. Because if I delay it from now in another 2 quarters, I'll be already outdated by one set of technology upgrade, right? So your innovation is very short-lived. Okay? Anywhere between 1 to 2 quarters is what we look at. And everything has to fall in place. One of the things what we see in innovation is nothing to do with the product. It is nothing to do with the thing. It is also the way you conceive your business model, the way you go and have a procurement or supply chain and do that, right? For example, many of the companies, especially the Western companies, follow a template version of their innovation and digital transformation. They say that I've got a plant in US, I've got a plant in Europe. So the same plant I'm going to expand in China or in, say, Thailand or Indonesia. Here it works. And it has miserably failed. The reason why I'm just putting it across is I'll quote an example. You have a labor shortage and thing in, say, Western Europe or in North America kind of thing. So you bring automation into place. You bring your cobots, you bring your AGVs and things. Whereas if you go to Indonesia, Southeast Asian markets kind of thing, labor is much more affordable than your automation. Your automation is much more expensive. So for me, innovation comes in the business model or the way I execute that, operations for me to achieve my bottom line or top line. Okay, that's how it comes in, truly speaking. One of the things, if you really ask me, the way we look at is, it is not a one-time exercise where I start and conclude, here it is, and thereafter everything going to sail through. Innovation is a very cyclic, closed loop that we see that. And today in manufacturing, industry, when we advise our customers at the CX suite and the board level, many of the things where people used to plan for 1 year, 2 year kind of innovation program has been shortened enough to do it in 1 or 2 quarters. So there is a pressure for them to prove it because of the business need and the criteria. So what we have effectively come up with our customers to help them is, we defined a framework called something called frugal, that is helping them. What does that frugal stands for? The way for supply chain Raghu was alluding to, we call this flexible. Your innovation should be remote, so it can be deployed and taken anything. And it should be unconventional, because we are challenging your old, or I would say the traditional wisdom. What you have been doing for all these years will do it for me also. We are challenging that thoughts, or and I also call that, after the pandemic, we are calling that as a global. So you need networks of suppliers, but the challenge in getting the network of suppliers to achieve your end goal, either in top line, bottom line, is, do my supplier ecosystem have the same level of digital maturity that I have? We cannot expect all the, and their suppliers even, right? They may not have the same level of maturity. So that gets into, and the last one is agile. So if you really ask me, innovation, we are seeing the trend. It can be in the product, it can be in the processes, it can be the way you procure, it can be in your business models, or it can be the way you expand your businesses. So that's how we look at innovation, and very happy in the process. We are using technology as the enabler to make it happen. But the main approach in which we take it, the innovation look into, is, unless until you measure your innovation or a digital transformation, not from an ROI standpoint, because that is a traditional way we measure all our successes. We measure our success of digital transformation and the innovation on ROV, the return on value that we bring it onto the table in business terms, is actually makes a success for us. That's how we look at it.
That's excellent. So thanks, Saurabh, for pulling up the slide. The data you're looking at is looking at statistics for the US workforce. In the last 30 years, we've seen women's participation in STEM going only up by 7%. And I'm sure you can extrapolate this data at a global level as well, right? And so how do we go about improving diversity in engineering? Of course, having more women participate, but diversity of all kinds, right? So to make a more inclusive workplace. So let me go to Jen to kick us off on this important subject.
Thanks. As a subject I'm super passionate about, and I think it's important that we highlight diversity of all kinds. I will say my intersection, obviously, as a woman in technology, I'm passionate about that. And look, I've spent my entire career having people show up to a meeting and say, well, we have to wait for the IT guy. I actually have a speech called, but I am the IT guy. I have the t-shirt that says, I am the IT guy. So I definitely know what it's like to be looked at not as the role you're in. But I will say, having done this for a long time, I hear so much about the pipeline, and I understand that that's the slide, but I think we have to work backwards. You know, how are we retaining the talent we have? Great if you need a pipeline, but if you get them and you can't keep them, what was the point, right? We need to think about, are we making environments that are psychologically safe? How are we breaking bias for all folks? I think women of color have it the worst in terms of, they've looked at that in terms of equal pay, in terms of representation in the executive and the C-suite. How do we make sure that women aren't getting stuck on the flypaper mid-career? And the same for other, areas of diversity. It's not just, one size fits all, but we see this happening in the stats. I was just promoted to CIO, super excited about that. But I will say, when I look around, there's not a lot of women doing what I do. And I see it and I notice it. So how do we make that environment where we don't have this she session we just went through, in this during the pandemic? How do we also make sure that we're making our environments, supportive of minorities, of parents, of people's full life? I mean, we're not just who we are when we come to work. So I think working backwards, that's really important. I think another thing that we need to think about as hiring managers, and one of the tips I tell to all of my managers is, I tell our recruiters, I will not look at any candidates until you give me a diverse pool. And I think that's really key, because not that you can't hire for diversity, you have to hire for talent. But if you don't have a diverse pool in the first place, you have no chance, right, of getting diversity in your environment. So by telling that to our recruiters as hiring managers, we are then forcing ourselves to make sure that we are putting that value front and center. And I think another thing that we need to think about is that it's all of our jobs, everyone on this call, all of us who are managers and leaders, to build the talent pool we want to hire from. Whether that means that we are building up folks and maybe they leave the company, you never know who you're going to hire again, who you're going to work with again. We need to contribute without it being, what am I going to get out of it? Because it always comes back. And finally, because we do know that the pipeline is important, I really, really encourage people to get involved with way earlier in the pipeline. There are STEM and STEAM programs for middle school, for high school. It's not just, going to the college and recruiting. There's a fantastic organization called Career Girls, and their whole website is showing girls who are 10 to 12 what's possible, what careers are out there. How do we all go back and contribute to that? I have tons of thoughts on digital transformation. I loved hearing all this stuff, but I will say I'm equally passionate about making sure that I'm not the only CIO that I see on a panel, right? That's a woman. So I hope that was helpful. Can't hold the passion in, but that's my thoughts.
Absolutely. I loved your points about, not just figuring out the talent pipeline, but mechanisms to retain talent, great talent when you get them. And then intersectionality, right? And we need to be aware of how to retain that in our talent. Okay, so Prasad, would love to hear from you as well. As you've got one of the biggest workforces out there, right? How are you encouraging diversity?
Yep. So nearing 700,000 people now in Accenture, and our goal is to be 50-50 at a minimum, if not more. Several initiatives organization-wide. But I would say, when we focus on engineering and manufacturing talent, here are some things to consider. I mean, within the next 5 years, there's going to be 2.4 million job shortage in manufacturing sector in US alone. And the 47% of the total workforce is women. But if you look at these salaries, women in manufacturing are earning 72% of the median salary. These are disparities that we need to address. But here is another fact. If you consider women in STEM education, the percentage of women earning undergraduate, graduate, or associate degree is more than 50%. So there is obviously the question, besides the initiatives that Jen, you had mentioned, for us to think very differently. The future of manufacturing and engineering is going to be very different because of the focus on digital transformation. And therefore, the traditional lenses and biases that have been applied to these jobs need to be broken down, needs to be thought through very differently. And that's one way to improve the diversity, not just about gender, but across the board, as Jen had mentioned. In Accenture, we have very specific programs at all levels, not just pipeline, nurturing, promotions, leadership positions to take care of the entire diversity quotient across the board. But I wanted to highlight the fact that if we can make women and other diversity people very visible, that creates inspiration, that creates motivation for women, especially to come forward at a very early age, girls to get inspired and really apply into the engineering manufacturing jobs. So those are a few thoughts that I want to leave. I know we are running out of time here.
That's great. So we need visibility in the future of engineering is going to look very different. So apart from Jen licensing out her I am the IT guy t-shirt, which I hope she does, but what else can we do? Harmeet, I'd love a view from you at Wipro.
Thank you, Ritika. This topic is very close to heart. Being a father of a daughter, I live it every day at home and do everything possible to give opportunities to her as she grows up and becomes a woman in the corporate world. At Wipro, the top when Thierry Delaporte joined us 2 years ago, his first out of his 5 priorities, number 1 priority is inclusion and diversity. It's part of the DNA, it's part of the organization fabric. If you look at the executive team, what you see executive team today, what you saw 2 years ago, the diversity percentage is materially changed. All leaders, they have KPIs on diversity, and diversity of all types. Of course, the focus is to address the gender diversity and be inclusive with the LGBTQ community as well, and all aspects of diversity. But you have to make progress in all directions, but gender diversity is where Wipro has taken some significant strategic steps, starting with a top-down approach. Second, accountability in hiring, which I think Jen talked about. And we hire we plan to hire about 40,000 freshers next year. These are engineers coming out of colleges. The expectation is that this is a very high number in terms of percentage. So today in Wipro, it's about 35% workforce is women. In engineering, in my organization, the number is very similar. In fact, 2 of my senior engineering leaders who are delivering services to our clients represent our role models from a gender diversity standpoint as well. The fresher talent is where we are headed significantly. We actually are delivering services to an oil company in the Middle East, which is 100% woman engineering team, working on core digital transformation, touching on mechanical engineering dimensions for a client. And when I talk about that, when I interact with the team, the level of passion, the level of energy, and the level of, the past myth perception that, hey, can you really have engineering team of that scale, which is represented by women? Answer is yes. They're all fresh out of college. They go through a training program, a skilling program, and they work on oil fields with the customers, enabling digital transformation, bringing all and ensuring the data insights are being made available to the clients. So very unique social impact being created in a very conservative country, which is going through a transformation as well. So as you can see, it's pretty close to heart personally, and as Wipro, we are in the forefront of it in terms of enabling the engineering dimension from a diversity play.
Yeah,
hopefully that was helpful.
That's a commendable, I think, comprehensive approach to solving this challenge, right? So, all right, I know we're over by a few minutes. Phil, over to you for a wrap up.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I know we've gone over a tiny bit, but not too bad. Thank you very much for your time. It was a very rich conversation, and I think I made a few notes throughout. And I think one of the things that really hit home is that the need for data visibility real time is bringing the whole conversation around supply chain into the boardroom and the CEO level, and away from just it's sort of traditional CTO, CIO level discussion. So I think that's come out loud and clear as the importance of the supply chain, the value chains, and the ecosystem in a very convoluted market. I picked out a few highlights from the discussion, which I thought were great. Steve, Rolls-Royce, came up with some good conversation around the complexity and level of integration that we're having to do at the moment. A lot of synchronized strategic tactical moves, coordinating with supply chains, partners and customers together. It's tough and it requires an awful lot of multitasking and complex synchronization. Jen made a great comment about the fact that, you know, she loves tech, especially the new and shiny stuff, but doesn't always serve the business. Everything needs to have the same goal, and it will be successful until you know, the business is really aligned in how to approach it. Some other great stuff that came out, I think Hilmar commenting about, you know, without a full understanding of the business, you won't be a full service provider in the future, whether you're internal or external, which really aligns with our one ecosystem vision, that this is much more than just one piece of the pie. This is really understanding all the component parts of the value chain. You know, Sora mentioned about sustainability. It's got to be more than just a line item or category of procurement. It's got to be a discipline that we're all getting aligned around, and it can't just keep being swept aside during something else to get distracted on. Prasad mentioned around manufacturing orgs, rethinking supply chain networks that need to be designed for the future. And obviously sustainability has to be brought into that thinking, where you can source ideas globally, reduce emissions globally, that sort of thing. And that brings me to say, I think when there is global collaboration, value is immense. And where there is poor global collaboration with things like the COVID crisis, it takes a lot longer to solve problems, that sort of thing. Whereas hopefully there's better collaboration around this Ukraine issue and other things. Creeper made a good point that with the pandemic, there's a real opportunity to drive medtech faster than some leadership is comfortable with. But we have to use these burning platforms to drive the change that has to happen, or change doesn't happen. We all know that. And then finally from Michael at BAT, I think focus people, data and tech in that order. Absolutely nailed it. People, data, tech in that order. So fantastic conversation. We're going to do a nice write-up of this as well, which we'll make available to everybody who's dialed in and joined today, that will share some of those thoughts and recommendations to industry. And I just want to thank everyone for their time. I know we're all incredibly busy and you know, a little frazzled after the last couple of years, but it's great to have a debate and share some great views and ideas and initiatives. So thank you everybody so much, and to the next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.